A group of people is closed up in a confined space which they cannot leave until they collectively reach an important decision, a life-changing decision. Does it remind you of anything? And if you think that I'm hinting at 2007 Russian remake of The 12 Angry Men, then sorry to disappoint. But today we've got an older and bigger fish to fry. The 1979 tragic comedy The Garage. Reviewing a film by Eldar Rязанов at the end of the year might become a tradition. Initially, I planned to do another one, a bit more festive. But I also plan to release this one in October. Like for luck now or later if you think it was worth your wait, and let's begin. I'm Katya, and this is Soviet Movies Explained. One of the reasons for my procrastination was the uncertainty of how to best structure my video. The movie is just 1.5 hours long, yet its proceedings might seem alien not only to foreign viewers but also to modern Russians. But that's exactly why I decided to make this channel in the first place, to explain. The movie is executed in Ryazanov's favorite genre of tragical comedy. The action is indeed quite tragic, only the surrounding circumstances are ridiculous. This movie was a bold satire of Soviet society's most acute and cloaked problems, such as bribery, nepotism, general unfairness, and duplicity. A story circulated that Ronald Reagan watched another movie, Moscow Doesn't Believe in Tears, several times in order to better understand the elusive Russian soul. But I think that he would have fared much better had he watched this movie instead. Keep on watching to find out whether you actually agree with that. So we'll proceed like this. I'll first outline the skeletal plot, then give the needed explanations about the background and base premises. Then we'll talk about the core characters and finish it off with my unsolicited speculations on what is really happening and why. Are you okay with that? Then like for... I said that already, didn't I? Yet an extra call for action would never hurt, would it? Let's do it. The comedy adopts the three classical unities of the Greek tragedy. The unity of action. The entire film is just one meeting of a garage building cooperative gone awry. Its stakeholders are all predominantly colleagues working at a fictional science research institute that bears a ridiculous name: Protection of Animals from the Environment. The unity of place. The meeting is held at a zoological museum that is curated by the institute amongst its stuffed animals and dioramas. Such a setting was to provide a more eye-catching background compared to a plain conference room, but at the same time allowed for some amusing and thought-provoking allusions. The unity of time. The meeting begins in the evening, goes on all night long, and concludes at dawn. In the beginning, the board of directors gives their report of the ongoing garage construction. Everyone is bored and wants to leave. But the best or the worst part of the report is saved for last. There has been a revision in the urban plan, and now a new highway is passing by the construction site, cutting off a piece and reducing the number of garage units from 32 to 28, which means they have to kick 4 stakeholders out. The board has a solution ready and a list of 4 victims that has already been reviewed and approved higher up.
Итак, зачитываю список с болью в сердце.
The cooperative just has to vote on it.
Да, стыдно, товарищи, но голосовать надо.
Which they of course do, happy to be spared, despite the weak protestations of the unlucky 4, who quickly turn to more desperate means. One steals and burns all the cooperative's papers. Another verbally attacks the deputy, making allegations. The third reveals the shocking truth about himself,
Я за машину родину продал.
while the fourth reveals scandalous truths about the board.
Вы забыли упомянуть о щедром и могущественном директоре рынка.
Still to no avail. The meeting is concluded and the people disperse, only to find the exit locked, and one of the stakeholders who abstained from the voting to demand to be allowed to address everyone first. And that is when all hell breaks loose. This was actually based on a real story. The director Ildar Riazanov was a member of a similar garage building cooperative organized by Mosfilm, Moscow Film Studios. One evening he went to a routine meeting and came out deeply disturbed and self-loathing, but with a ready screenplay in his head. He was shocked how some of his colleagues, prominent culture workers and famous people, resorted to mean personal attacks and backstabbing, all to get something as trivial as a box to store a heap of stamped metal. He was even more disappointed by his own reaction. He proved to be of the pliant majority who sat there quietly happy to be spared and not willing to stick his own neck out for someone else. This movie was his way to process his feelings and get some sort of absolution. Well, the dramatics was resumed momentarily. Just let's step back a sec and look into what a garage building cooperative actually was. And how could this apparent form of real estate ownership exist in the Soviet Union, where private property was effectively banned? That was actually a clever legal loophole on the government's part. The members of the building cooperative indeed put their own money in and at the end got their own private garage or an apartment, but they owned neither the property nor the land plot. It was group owned and managed by the cooperative, and the land was allotted by the government. This way, the Soviet government let people self-organize and independently solve the pressing problem, the lack of parking spaces in the cities. While at the beginning of the 70s it was an average of 2 cars per 100 families, at the end of a decade it became 10 per 100. In no way was it as rapid a growth as in Europe or in the US, yet urban planners haven't planned for it. They still operated under the outdated standard of 1 ground parking place per 10 apartments, and no parking houses were ever considered. I won't now dwell on how the Soviet people got the cars or money to buy them, since I've got just the right movie to cover the subject at a later time. I'll just mention that after the strenuous post-war rebuilding phase, the country joined the rest of the world in the inevitable period of economic growth. Yes, the 70s and the 80s were the time of stagnation in the Soviet Union with its disillusionment and cognitive dissonance, but many remember it as the time of great stability, growth of income, and well-being. By then, the most families, at least in the capitals, have already solved their housing problems thanks to the ongoing mass construction problem. And the next logical step in the Soviet dream would have been a private car. These cars were doubly precious not only because of the considerable price, from 5 to 8,000 rubles, with the monthly base salary of the head worker from 120 to 150 rubles, but also because of their scarcity. The industry failed to meet their growing demand, and people had to virtually queue to buy a car for years. Naturally, car theft and black market resale boomed, and a place where one could securely keep the long-awaited precious vehicle under lock and key became a pressing necessity, a deficit. This Lent word is extremely well known and triggering to most ex-Soviet citizens. Remember it for later. So, in 1960, out came a decree that car owners can now organize into garage building cooperatives. After securing enough stakeholders, 10 in smaller cities and 50 in bigger ones, electing a board of directors and approving their cooperative's charter, they got registered as a legal entity and got a land plot from the city. The rest, the project design, permissions and procurement of materials and workforce, were to be managed and paid by the stakeholders. One such garage cost from 1,500 to 5,000 rubles. Usually there was a down payment and the rest was paid out in increments, like mortgage, like a mortgage but without interest. Additionally, one could put in labor instead of money, working at a construction site, for example. Well, that's enough background for now. Let's go back to the movie. It took Rязанов and his co-writer just 4 days to write the script and 24 days to shoot it. There are 32 members in the cooperative and all of them are present at the meeting, and at least half of them is portrayed by famous actors. And although many of them have already worked with Rязанов on his other films and were happy to join, they primarily worked in theaters. For Soviet actors, theater, especially one located in Moscow or St. Petersburg, was their regular day job, while cinema remained a lucky and unreliable gig. So Rязанов had to negotiate and coordinate with all those theaters to have their primary actors released from rehearsals. He got a month. They shot from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day, including weekends, so by 7 p.m. the busiest of them could go on stage. To speed things up, Rязанов utilized the TV studio setup that he first used while making his The Irony of Fate. By the way, it's high time to rewatch my video on it. There were 3 cameras, all rolling simultaneously. This way, the actors, even with smaller roles, had no way of knowing where they are currently on camera or not, and had to stay in character and give their best at all times. Improvisation was encouraged. I think it's genius writing on Ryazanov's part to create so many compelling characters and not turn it into a mess. Well, almost. Each of the main characters represents some intelligentsia stereotype, but at the same time is given a unique story arc. And here they are, beginning with our honorable board. Comrade Anikеева. She is the woman of power, the cooperatives and the research institute's deputy director. She is shrewd and cunning, knows the ropes and how to get things done. She is a doctor of science, a prominent ornithologist with the worldwide recognition who attended a conference in Paris. This was no small feat, but a thing of envy for everyone present. Mind you, a trip abroad, no matter business or recreational, even to one of the friendly socialist countries, was something extraordinary, on par with getting a flat, a car, a garage, and a dacha. It required great trust, a stellar reputation, and of course patronage. As for getting exposed to the corrupting influence of the capitalist West, only the select few, like athletes, artists, scientists and such, were let out after careful selection and with great reluctance. One could bring a tape recorder or a TV from such a trip, sell it, and be set for life. Sidorin is the cooperative's chairman and the institute's veterinarian. I actually cannot add much to that. It's quite curious how such a central character managed to leave so little impact while still remaining pretty memorable. Maybe that was exactly the design. A cunning, slimy character who adapts to the situation quickly and steers it in his best interest.
Вовремя предать — это не предать, это предвидеть.
His most memorable feature is that he addresses everyone by sarcastically endearing names, like my faithful one, my candid one, my unscrupulous one. Now to those unlucky 4 whom the board initially proposed to exclude. The first one is Khvostov, a lab tech who cares about aquatic mammals and who temporarily lost his voice by going into ice water to administer a medicine to a seal. So he is literally mute for the duration of the proceedings, yet tries his best to demonstrate his indignation and be heard. Such a handicapped role was quite a challenge for Andrei Mягkov, who first starred in Ryazanov's The Irony of Fate and since then became one of director's favorite actors, a member of his permanent cast. Fetisov is yet another familiar face from that movie. Upset by his expulsion, he reveals that he has sold his motherland for a car, to everyone's shock and disgust.
Попрошу факт продажи Родины зафиксировать в протоколе.
Then he clarifies that he meant his lesser motherland, or homeland, Malaya Rodina, a house in the country where his ancestors and he were born and grew up. He represents an uprooted peasant type who had to move to a big city in search of a better life. He's unsophisticated, yet sincere, and has skilled hands. Guskov is another institute researcher whom we actually never see, him being represented by his wife, a seemingly well-dressed and well-groomed lady who, however, goes ballistic at the news. She's sick and tired of her husband always being a scapegoat, sidelined, and never recognized for his work. She's particularly bitter that it was Anikеева who went to Paris to report on the findings that her husband had made.
Он пишет научный доклад для симпозиума в Париже, а едете за жгутками вы, товарищ Аникеева.
It is never actually revealed why did Guskov deserve such a bad rep, but everyone agrees that he is a fitting candidate to be expelled.
И кто там четвертый?
Гуськов,
Да,
конечно.
да, Гуськов, правильно, Гуськов. Он для этого годится. Все.
Yakubov is a former institute member, now retired. When Yelena, his ex-colleague and the one who actually locked the meeting in, reveals that he's a decorated war veteran, the board immediately backpedals, reinstates his membership, and laments their grave political mistake.
Ну почему же вы нам ничего не сказали о своем славном военном прошлом? Ну почему?
Да какое имеет значение это военное прошлое для получения гаража?
Ну как же?
The reason for the board's agitation is the privileged role of the World War II veterans in the Soviet Union and the government's changed attitude towards Victory Day, which is celebrated on the 9th of May in Russia. If earlier this day was a bittersweet private holiday starting from its 20th anniversary in 1965, which actually coincided with Brezhnev's coming into power as the new country head, it gradually became more and more pompous, with military parades, fireworks, concerts, openings of monuments, and veterans meetups broadcast on TV. The veterans received deserved praise along with valuable gifts and privileges, like permission to skip queues, both physical and virtual. It greatly annoyed some people, for there still was an abundance of war veterans and a deficit of valuable goods to queue for. This might be the reason why Yakubov was reluctant to make his status public, but when the cat is out of the bag, he visibly relaxes and withdraws, letting the board now find another victim to kick out. For that, he berates himself later, ashamed at how quickly and easily he forgot his comrades in misfortune. It is also Yakubov who challenges the board to reveal the two members whom they have secretly added to the stakeholders list.
В списке пайщиков появился какой-то там Милосердов. Но никакого Милосердова мы на собрании не принимали.
The son of comrade Miloserdov, some almighty party official whom everyone knows. Anikеева is actually appalled at the use of "some" in connection with his name, which in Russian, by the way, means tender-hearted, as if it's an act of blasphemy.
Как вы смеете называть товарища Милосердова? Какой-то и никакой.
His patronage has sufficiently sped up the construction of the garages. The son, we never actually learn his name.
Я вас умоляю, не называйте своего имени. Вы для меня навсегда останетесь сын Милосердова.
He keeps low profile, neither flaunting his privileged position nor denying it.
Где такой пиджачок рванули? В Сингапуре.
Yet he poses as a Byronic hero in his choice of profession. Instead of the typical golden boy vacations, he chose a slightly less prestigious archaeology. He's completely indifferent to his fate when it comes to the garage and pays no heed to the repeated calls to kick him out. He knows that it's not his last chance to get one. The second one is Madame Kushakova, who is a marketplace director
Делайте из меня мясной ряд.
and perhaps one of the least sympathetic characters. When it came to wealth and power in the Soviet Union, a retail worker could overshadow even a party bigwig. Everyone knew that they embezzled and set aside deficit goods for their acquaintances, despised them, yet sucked up to them in hopes of becoming acquaintances themselves.
Вашему, помещанскому. Если человек работник торговли, значит, это обязательно вор и взятошник.
Anikеева is suspiciously quick to defend Kushakova, claiming that she can steal nothing at a market, it being no shop, but no one buys it. After all, she's the only one driving a foreign car, a red Mercedes. In those times, it equaled having a private jet for a vehicle. Everyone joyfully kicks Kushakova out, and she outright curses the lot, swearing to exact her vengeance upon them. By the way, the actress who played the market director is the wife of Andrei Mягков. They were charmingly devoted to each other, worked at the theater together, and Andrei always tried to secure a role for her in films, for she had a streak of bad luck in cinema. Here he succeeded, and they must have had lots of fun shooting together. To be absolutely honest, I don't understand why the board had to sneak these people in secret, other than the necessities of the plot, of course. Before their deal with the urban plan revision, there were enough garages for everyone, and it was actually a very clever step on board's part to secure such powerful people.
Кушакова это бетон, Кушакова это железные ворота, Кушакова это бульдозер. Да. Что такое сын Милосердова? Не мне вам объяснять, товарищ.
I'm sure that were their candidacies voted upon, they would have been greeted with open arms. But now their personas cause an outburst of class hatred and are branded блатные. By the way, I noticed that the English subtitles in the free YouTube upload of the movie have it wrong.
Но я не согласна с формулировкой, товарищи. Это не блатные, это полезные люди.
They translated the adjective блатной as criminal. And though in modern Russia the term predominantly has criminal meaning, remember блатная песня from the third Shurik's adventure video, usually referring to a member of a professional gang. In USSR, blat was a widespread form of corruption, a system of informal agreements, exchanges of services, and useful connections. The word's etymology is not clear. Some say that it comes from German das Blatt, a paper or a certificate that granted certain privileges to foreign settlers in Russia during the reigns of Peter the Great and Catherine the Great. Others dig deeper and suggest other origin words, German das Blut, blood, or even Yiddish Blatt, meaning close or familiar. Anyway, it meant some sort of proof of privilege or nepotism. In the USSR, having a Blatt meant that you knew whom to call or which back door to knock on in order to obtain deficit goods or services ahead of the majority, provided you were ready to pay extra or render services in return, or at least knew a person who could. Such chains of connections could become insanely complex and validated the six handshakes theory many times over. Here is an example.
Когда цемента не было, всю бригаду в Большой театр на Жизель водили.
По счастью, дирижера такса в это время страдала стригущим лишаем.
So the vet treated the dog of the conductor in Большой Theatre, who in return procured the hard-to-get tickets to a ballet to be given to the construction brigade as an incentive for them to obtain cement. The cooperative suspects that the two off-the-record members have bribed the board with money or favors. Market director indeed lent Anikеева money to buy a car.
Боже, какая гадость! Какая гнусная, дешевая месть!
That's why Kushakova and Miloserdov's son are called блатные. Okay, back to the characters and let's finish with the baddie, shall we? The last outwardly unpleasant character is Karpukhin, your typical yes man and authorities lackey. He openly says it himself.
Да, мне нравится касается наше правление. Потому что я против анархии. Я за порядок и дисциплину. Я из большинства. Но таких, как я, все держится.
He demonstratively wears some official-looking pin. I couldn't find what exactly it indicates. But his behavior absolutely undermined the sterling image of the upstanding party member. Karpukhin says the meanest things to women, sucks up to the market director, and ridicules the research of his colleagues.
Ты типичный псевдоученый. Изучаешь серебристого журавля. А он, между прочим, гнездится за границей, у нас бывает только пролетом.
At the same time, his old fields of research is most bizarre of all.
Я, между прочим, занимаюсь выведением особого вида обезьян, морозоустойчивых. Мои макаки в сибирской тайге будут собирать кедровые шишки, лущить их, складывать в ящики, понимаете?
Наклеивать ярлыки.
This is a satire of all the meaningless jobs that were done in hundreds of such science research institutes. The fashion for scientific and engineering professions resulted in a surplus of bright-eyed graduates, whom the country actually didn't require. Most of them, unless they got lucky and got involved in some strategically important industry, got dumped to such institutes, where they pushed papers or test tubes until retirement. Okay, let's lighten up the mood and switch to the bright side, where our heroes are. Yelena Malayeva, our Henry Fonda for today, the bearer of the bacillus of justice, as described by Rязанов himself. Her field of research is vipers. She's a single mother without ever being married and is generally treated as an inconsequential, unattractive and bitter woman.
Если женщина с такими внешними данными борется за правду, она наверняка не замужем.
Ох, угадали.
Malayeva is played by Lea Akhidjakova, who shone so brightly in her tiny role in The Irony that Rязанов tried to engage the actress in his future works and tailored this particular role especially for her. Yelena abstained from voting and wants to address the gathering. Since the door is locked, and initially she doesn't admit doing that.
Зачем вы это сделали? Вас же не исключили?
Вам, боюсь, этого не понять.
She is given the stage and proposes a more fair method of determining the odd for outs.
Я предлагаю жить по демократическим советским принципам.
To assess and vote on each of the stakeholders individually. Her idea is dismissed as unfeasible, but then Yelena uncovers the military past of Yakubov, and the board has to rack their brains for another scapegoat. For her insolence, Malayeva is repeatedly insulted. Streep search for the key.
Товарищи, у меня нет опыта. Я это делаю непрофессионально.
Лиха беда начала.
And her family circumstances dragged through the mud by Karpukhin and Kushakova. It is clear that the director is very fond of the character, but at the same time, in her struggle for common justice, Malayeva completely forgets about her 7-year-old son, who is left overnight at home alone.
Мой ребенок. Хочу, кормлю, хочу, нет.
Natasha, an ornithologist, is actually the first person to call out the unfairness of the board's decision.
Вот Семен Александрович громко протестует против несправедливого и бессовестного исключения.
But she holds no weight in the proceedings, since she is not a stakeholder and merely came in to care for her lover, a distinguished professor who is many times her senior. They try to keep their affair secret. In public, she addresses him by his full name and uses the polite pronoun «вы» instead of an informal «ты».
Добрый вечер, Павел Константинович. Ну сколько можно заседать?
Вы зачем пришли?
Есть срочное дело.
But naturally, everyone knows and gossips about it. The rowdy Karpukhin shames Natasha for her mistress status, which forces the professor, who was initially reluctant to marry her, to propose. This character, Professor Smirnovsky, opens the list of somewhat neutral characters, neither good nor bad. He is actually Ryazanov's alter ego, a person who is considered decent, but only because he has avoided conflict and hasn't been forced to make hard decisions.
Надо было и мне голосовать против. Конечно, это ни к чему бы не привело, но я бы не чувствовал себя так мерзко. Испугался. 2 гаража на одну семью.
Ладно, не мучайся. Совесть сегодня не в моде. К сожалению. Да, нам, интеллигентам, свойственно делать пакость, а потом долго-долго себя терзать.
He used to be more righteous in his youth, but his fame as a scientist and comfortable life made him soft and cowardly. However, Smirnovsky had his moment of rebellion that caused quite a stir in both the world of the movie and the real world of censorship. Some time ago, his entire lab was temporarily sent to a vegetable warehouse to pack and sort potatoes. As a high-ranking scientist, he was exempt from this duty, but he went along and put his business card in every bag of potatoes, making the consumers aware of what such a overqualified and high-paid specialist has to do. His salary is cited to be 500 rubles per month.
Жалобы на качество были?
Вроде нет.
А когда вы покупаете коробку конфет, ведь там внутри всегда лежит такая бумажка, укладчица, номер такой-то. А на овощной базе ни мне, ни докторам наук, ни кандидатам никаких номеров не давали.
The practice of borrowing budget workers, students, military and prisoners was an annual occurrence in the Soviet Union and other socialist countries. Usually their unqualified labor was used for the harvest or any other task that required lots of people and lacked mechanization and motivation on the peasants' part. Such semi-obligatory outings were called выезд на картошку, a trip to dig out potatoes, and were common knowledge, yet not something media openly talked about. So both Smirnovsky and Ryazanov committed a major faux pas. And, while the latter was merely chastising the film, the former was ordered to change the scene. The director managed to wriggle out of it by proposing several even more ridiculous alternatives, like packing pineapples or cleaning the Olympic Village, which was a valid destination for potato trips in view of the upcoming Olympic Games of 1980. Professor Smirnovsky has one more reason to keep low profile. His daughter Marina is with him in the cooperative, and technically they cannot claim more than one garage per family.
И не лезь в драку, у нас самих рыло в пуху.
Да я и не лезу!
Along with Miloserdov's son, Marina is another privileged kid, as close to aristocracy as one could get in the Soviet Union. No wonder that they gravitate towards each other. But unlike him, she took the standard path.
У меня все по штампу. Нормально.
Majored in philology at the prestigious Moscow State University and now studies satire.
У вас потрясающая профессия, вы занимаетесь тем, чего нет.
Yet another example of a pointless time filler for a job. She's recovering from an unsuccessful marriage that...
Мой недавний муж отбил у меня всякую охоту к еде в любое время суток.
A sexual innuendo that was a rare guest in the uptight Soviet cinema because... Marina and Natasha were classmates, and she disapproves of her father's affair, naming Marina a gold digger. At the same time, she actively flirts with Miloserdov's son, whom she dismissed earlier before his stellar lineage was revealed. The trombone player is actually more on the side of the baddies. He wants the meeting to be over because he has a career-defining recording to attend the morning after.
Если я не высплюсь, я такое сфальшивлю.
The groom, on the other hand, gives an inspiring speech about how wild animals in distress don't attack their own kind, unlike them, people at the meeting.
Товарищи, мы же топим друг друга!
He is the groom because he came to the meeting straight from his wedding and is impatient to get back to his bride.
У него жена больная, а у меня невеста здоровая!
His despair is comical, but he worries that in those hours that he is away, she would marry someone else. This actually pokes fun at how quick Soviet people were to marry and how high were the divorce rates. Marriage, especially in big cities, gave many advantages. Apart from the obvious social security for children and young mothers, people could get a residence permit at a better place or request a bigger apartment, and so on. But it's a subject to explore some other time and in some other movie. Having gone through the cast of main characters, I must mention Ryazanov's cameo, whose appearance in his own films became a tradition since The Irony of Fate. Here, he is a nameless head of the Department of Insects who sleeps through the entire proceedings hugging a hippopotamus. This actually fed a Nolan-esque fan theory that the entire ordeal is the director's dream. I doubt this is the case, but the character's role in the movie's ending is yet to be discussed. Meanwhile, a couple of details that I should mention or that were lost in translation. When longingly describing his gone homeland, Fetisov mentions the land plot's area.
Участок 15 соток. Дом в 2 этажа. Но вот удобство во дворе.
15 соток, which means are, not hectare as in subtitles. A unit of area of 100 square meters. That's why its colloquial name sotka, 100, is an unofficial but popular measurement of small land plots in Russia and other ex-Soviet countries. The most typical area of a dacha land plot is 600 meters, 6 sotok. That's why this became a common noun ascribed to this type of property regardless of its actual size.
Твоя во всем и везде привык идти законным путем.
Законным путем идти можно, дойти трудно.
The original line here was, but finishing it legally is impossible, but censors demanded it to be softened. When Malayeva begins her speech, Miloserdov's son refers to her as a white crow.
Оказывается, белые вороны еще существуют.
В природе это большая редкость, но, по счастью, у нас есть.
Karpukhin is quick to confirm that their museum indeed has a rare albino bird in their collection. This is a Russian version of an idiom, a black sheep. Белая ворона is as awkward amongst its black brethren as a black sheep would stand out in a flock of white.
В доме погасли огни. Товарищи, подхватывайте.
The collective lullaby performed by the cooperative when they attempt to get a quick shut-eye is a song from a well-known children's evening TV program. Children's evening TV program, Good Night Little Ones. First aired in 1964, this show is still running and along with its puppet characters, moral lessons and animated opening and closing titles, is an essential part of every Soviet kid's childhood, mine included.
Да разве на фронте я себе так позволил? Ведь там ни хрена не боялся. А здесь из-за этого паршивого гаража.
An incorrect translation here. Yakubov says that he wasn't afraid of anything at the front, yet is afraid of losing the damn garage now and ashamed of it. It's a fitting segue to attempt to answer the question that arises from many modern viewers. Why does everyone cling to those damn garages? Why does no one send it all to hell and give up their garage voluntarily just to leave this cursed meeting? Especially since some of them have pretty high stakes here, like the trombone player with his recording, the groom with his long-awaited bridal night, Karpukhin with an old wife, saying nothing about Malayeva with the small kid alone at home, who actually initiated the lock-in in the first place. Well, to proceed that, we first need to understand the context and the state of mind of the Soviet people at the time. I am neither a sociologist, nor a historian, nor a telepath, but I'll try to give my take on the matter, and you are welcome to argue with me and give your opinions in the comments, as long as you do it in a civil and constructive way, of course. Today's word of the day, deficit, permeated all spheres of Soviet life. Fault of the planned economy meant that not only individuals had to constantly hunt for essential consumer goods, but also large factories had to compete amongst each other for raw materials or pieces of tech for their own production in order to fulfill the planned quotas of their own. Those whose procurers were the most vocal or the most intimidating or had the best connections or gave the best bribes got served first. Similarly, those who had blood knew a director of a market or a department store, for example, could expect that when a new shipment of fresh beef or fruit or ladies' stockings or polished shoes arrived, some would be reserved for them. Maintaining such connections was not only a matter of comfort, but a status thing.
Откуда у тебя эти сапоги? Я полгода за такими гоняюсь. А это мне принесли.
The majority who had neither connections, nor the services to offer, nor the extra money to pay, had to be on the constant lookout for opportunities to snatch up some deficit, no matter what it was.
Успокойтесь, Жень.
An automatic response to seeing a large queue would to take place in it first and then ask, что дают, what's being sold. Sometimes no one would even know, but would queue anyway in hopes that something good has been delivered to the store, выбросили, being thrown or tossed out.
Знаете, как раз сегодня выбросили в пассаже именно такие, как вам надо, с планкой светлые.
Да-да. Свитерок какой-то сверху, вот сейчас, кстати, выбросили в ГУМе, батники, блайзер сверху.
For example, you are an unmarried woman and they sell men's leather shoes, and only the smallest or the largest sizes are left after the blатные had their pick. So you either take the smallest size, stuff their toes with cotton wool and wear them yourself, or take their largest pair to sell or trade in to your colleague or relative. And while such moments of wild luck brought people intense happiness and made them alert and resourceful, you can imagine how exhausting, humiliating and permeated with fear of missing out such a life was.
Я достала курицу, живого карпа и ветчину. А ветчина уже
Not surprising that this lady cannot shut up about her chicken, and a live fish, and a ham. Buying such rare delicacies in one go was akin to winning a lottery, and she snatched them up without thinking that she still has a long meeting to sit through with her treasures. And not surprising that the majority of the cooperative absolutely refuses to budge. Most likely, each one of them was affected by unfair decisions at some point in their lives. A boss goes to Paris instead of you. Someone's protege gets a flat ahead of you. Someone's kids get sent to a summer camp at the sea instead of yours. Most of the time, they never even knew that for sure, since such things were usually done behind closed doors. But this time they put their own money in, and they're supposed to have equal shares and equal rights and a semblance of democracy. So, seeing the same story repeat itself in the open, they go berserk.
Один 7-летний мальчик написал стихотворение такое: «У верблюда 2 горба, потому что жизнь борьба».
I will now talk about the ending, so if you want to watch the film first without spoilers, here is the timestamp to jump to, although I personally don't think that knowing the ending can ruin your experience of the film in any way, but I'll leave it up to you. So the solution to the impasse to draw lots is first proposed by the professor.
Вы знаете, я предлагаю бросить жребий.
Ой, жребий — это не наш метод. Мы не в карты играем, в конце концов.
And then brought to life in the classical manner of the Greek tragedy. A miracle occurs, and the mute regains his speech.
Люди, люди, человеки! Одумайтесь, вон утро уже, так мы вообще тут с ума все посходим.
Entranced by it, the stakeholders follow his lead and vote to re-elect their board, toss out the 2 blатные, and draw lots. Since in another act of godly intervention, Anikeever's car got stolen, only 1 lot of 29 is an unhappy one. It also happens to be the last one left, when seemingly everyone has drawn. But then it appears that they have missed the head of the insects department, Rizanov's character, who slept through it all. And the film ends with him staring in confusion at the surrounding leering crowd.
Тяните, жребий.
The lesson that failure due to inaction is a more sure thing than through action is a one way to look at this ending, and it hasn't lost its relevance to this day. Apart from that, such an open ending received mixed reviews and many interpretations, especially since it differs from the original script. I've read many renditions of it, some more, some less ridiculous, but I'll stick with the version that Rязанов himself voiced in his autobiography. The movie was to end earlier, at the moment when everyone began to draw lots. But he later decided to give his audience a more satisfying conclusion, which for many wasn't satisfying at all, and punish no one but himself. Please tell me, which version do you prefer? I personally cannot help but wonder whether the cooperative's victory was a Pyrrhic one. Yes, the decision to draw lots was the best one they could make under the circumstances, and it was quite a common way to settle delicate matters in the cooperative. For example, my parents were in a housing cooperative and they had to draw lots to determine which housing block and which floor their apartment would be on. But impeaching a competent, albeit self-serving board of directors and expelling the most useful members might bring the construction to a complete standstill. And the parting threats of the market director, she's vindictive enough to exact her revenge and sabotage the project.
Я добьюсь, что магистраль перенесут, она пройдет по вашему участку. А частные гаражи мы снесем, как уродующее лицо города.
And everyone would be without garages at the end. At the same time, I was quite distressed to realize that were I at a similar meeting, I would have played along with the board and with the majority exactly like Rязанов did more than 40 years ago. Some say that the movie Garage is the best one in Ryazanov's entire filmography, while others cannot stand it, calling it messy, stuffy, boring and weirdly paced. But everyone agrees on its cultural and historical importance. When it just came out, many, including Rязанov himself, was shocked at how such an anti-Soviet film managed to get greenlit and released. Many were outraged at the depiction of the intelligentsia as petty Philistines, but that was the sad truth of the stagnation.
А для вас самое главное личные интересы. Будь он у меня гараж. Остальное все пропади-пропадом. Мы, собственно говоря, здесь все боремся за место под солнцем! В виде гаража! Что тут скрывать?
Everyone inwardly acknowledged and was tormented by their own duplicity. Their care for the good of the collective remained their primary moral goal, but it ran on fumes. And instead of an abstract and ever-postponed communist utopia, people wanted good and comfortable and private life now. And the cynicism and the lack of trust that were born then permeates our lives to this day. You're welcome to watch it and make up your own mind. Here is the link as usual with English subtitles that have been Katya approved. We're now entering the holiday season and I really wish that everyone would enjoy the best time possible. There won't be another big episode on this channel before the end of the year, and no guessing game because I haven't planned it through yet. But I promise that we will meet once more before this one is over. Stay tuned, stay safe, stay warm. Bye.
Расскажи, Снегурочка, где была? Расскажи-ка, милая, как дела?
Бегала Дед Мороз, пролила немалую горьких слез.
Let's do this. I've got 13 pages of script. It's my longest script so far. I reckon it would be about over 30 minutes long, like maybe 40. I wonder if you have watched the entire 40 minutes so that you've reached this point.